Welcome, welcome everyone. I'm sure folks will be trickling in, but again, just want to thank everybody who took time out of their busy schedules to show up for us today. I'm really excited about this webinar today, and I just want to thank everyone for joining us for this important conversation on allyship. I know as a survivor leader, allyship and issues around allyship are always part of the conversation. And at My Life, My Choice, allyship is almost as important as survivor leadership to us, because without allies, I know I wouldn't be where I am today. And my first My Life, My Choice, when we first started up, it was just Lisa Gold, Black Grace, and myself. And now we have a team made up of survivor leaders and allies working together to end the commercial sexual exploitation of children. And so my goal here today was I wanted to bring a diverse group of allies from our team alongside one of our survivor leaders who unfortunately is out sick today, to share some of their thoughts and experiences. So I will be filling in for her. And one of the things before I introduce the panel that I want to say is that it's not just the survivor's responsibility to end exploitation. It really is everyone's responsibility, and survivors alone shouldn't be the folks that are expected to end this horrible sex trade, which is $1 billion industry. So let me dive in. And first I want to introduce Amy Corbett, our senior clinician and a clinical supervisor, is a skilled clinician, longtime advocate, even long before she joined our team. I worked with her running a group. She was running a group home for exploited girls and an expert on C-sect. And she is one of my favorite and most, ally extraordinaire. She is one of my favorite people in this work because her and I really, really do go a long, long way back. And I also want to introduce Niah, our prevention and training coordinator, began her career with My Life, My Choice a little over a year ago, and has stepped right up as an incredible ally and young leader in our work, which often challenges the belief some people have about the sex industry. And I really wanted to, when I began my team planning this, we wanted to include someone newer with the organization who has become like such a fabulous ally. And she'll talk about her experience here at My Life, My Choice and what that's like for her. And also, AJ is our Assistant Director of Operations and Evaluations, has a public health background and is a back of the house ally superstar, right? We have allies that are in the forefront and we have our allies that are in the back of the house. And I always have to give her such a shout out. She uses data, which I know nothing about, but she gets really excited about. She uses data and systems to support and help amplify survivor voices and experiences. And again, Susan Alves, who will not be with us today because she's not feeling well. And so with her not being here, I'll do my best to fill in for her. But I'm just like really, really excited. And so for my panelists, I just want to dive right in. Can each of you describe your role at My Life, My Choice and explain what allyship means in your work? What does it look like working with survivors day to day at My Life, My Choice? And we'll start with you, AJ.
Thank you, Audrey. My day-to-day work involves creating and implementing evaluation plans, in addition to managing databases and project management overall. I work closely with survivor leaders for all of our program areas. And as Audrey said, I do a lot of the back of the house work, which I love. Allyship is really important in this role because traditionally, evaluation work has a history of excluding the people that we're doing research on, or in this instant, it has a history of excluding survivor voices. So in my day-to-day, I am partnering with survivor leaders to inform evaluation work, incorporate their voice, and so that they have input on our data and the systems that we used to show the overall impact of My Life, My Choice.
Thank you, AJ. Amy.
Thanks, Audrey. So as Audrey mentioned, my current role is as senior clinician and clinical supervisor. So what that means is I oversee the therapy services that are offered to our mentees or the young people we work with. I provide individual therapy to those mentees, and then I also provide clinical supervision to survivor mentors. I work on the survivor empowerment team, so I interact with survivors on a day-to-day basis to provide clinical support. Allyship in my role is really about building relationships and ensuring that there is a sense of safety. It has really been about listening and learning for me. As many of you know, all the work at My Life, My Choice is survivor-led and survivor-informed, and it's been really important to me to include survivor voices and expertise into the creation and the development of the therapy services that we offer, so that we have a knowledge of what would be most effective and useful for the young people we serve.
Thank you so much, Amy. And when I think about, as a survivor leader at My Life, My Choice, and I think about what my day-to-day looks like working alongside allies. I've met allies from across the country, but one of the things that our agency, we hire more survivors than really any other agency across the country. And we also have just as many allies that we're working with. So day to day, I think of how we all support each other. I feel like from day to day, our survivors are, come from various degrees of education. And when I'm at work from day to day at My Life, My Choice, it's very inclusive, supportive, not judgmental. The allies, the strong allies that we have, is always lifting us up. I always share this story of when I first started, Lisa Gold Black Grace and myself, when it was just the two of us. And I think about when I think of training, and I remember I would train with her, and she would always on the slides, when we did slides, because we've been around, they say before Christ, we trained before slides. And so when we finally began to use slides, after being like really fearful of, oh my God, we usually have the flip chart and a marker. But I remember seeing those slides in the introduction, and she would always put her name above my name. And I thought, why is she doing that? I'm like, this woman is so brilliant and smart. And when I think about day to day, this is what happens at My Life, My Choice, like lifting each other up, and how she kind of like knew who she was, but stood back and really educated people on the survivor voice and how important that was. And just by her doing that, and what I see at My Life, My Choice from day to day, I see uplifting. We just uplift survivors. That's what the day to day. I another survivor who just started training, and we put her name on the slides, and she said, thank you, Lisa. Lisa would always put her name above mine. Thank you for that pull up, Lisa. Thank God for the chat. But to the day to day, I think of even myself. I said it again. Okay. Even when I think of myself, a survivor that works with us who just started training, she saw her name on the slides, and she said, oh my God, I really feel a part of the team now, right? And then after her seeing that, later that day, because she just started training, it was like her 4th training, she also said, I can do more slides now, right? And I learned that, and I'll get it right this time, from Lisa putting my name above her name. And so I passed down what she gave me to uplift another survivor. So my next question to my panel is, how are you each intentional in your allyship? And Amy, I'll start with you.
So I feel like I try to be really thoughtful in my allyship. It's about really maintaining an awareness of myself and creating and holding space for the survivors who I work with daily. It's not about taking up space. So I feel like I really know when I need to step back. It's about regular and constant reflection about who I am in this work. I really want to see survivors thrive and succeed and feel good about themselves in doing so. My Life, My Choice is based on the social justice framework that those most impacted by an issue have the most knowledge how to fix it. I'm proud to be a part of this work, and I know my work makes an impact, but I also know my voice is not the most important one in the room. And just a quick example that I can share about that is in my days of facilitating prevention groups with some of the mentors on my team. It was so important to me to go into that space and sort of like take a back seat and really watch the survivor mentors I co-facilitated with speak up and make sure I let them take the lead and sort of work their magic with the group. And I feel like it's really important to sort of, for me to do that in all spaces in I'm connected to.
Thank you, Amy. AJ.
Yeah, I'm intentional in my allyship by putting relationships based on trust and respect first. So even when I first started here, I could dive heavily into data things, and I quickly realized that in order to be an effective ally and be a member of this team, that like the relationships I built with others were the most important. And so that is what I put at the forefront of my work. I try to practice deep listening, really trying to understand where I'm needed and where I'm not, and being okay with that. Recognizing my skills as like the data person complements the work of my survivor colleagues. And similar to what Amy said, I think accountability is really important in allyship. I try to be self-aware and constantly checking in with myself, staying engaged and a part of the conversation, even when it's hard. And lastly, I really try to bring my authentic self to the table, my flaws and otherwise, and I think that the genuine presence I bring goes a long way.
And it does, AJ. It just does. Niah.
Yeah, to echo what Amy and AJ both said, listening is also a key part of being a good ally to me as well. It's important to listen in any strong relationship that you have. It's customary to defer to the expert in any field, and when it comes to exploitation, our survivors are our experts. I feel like I've learned so much just by listening to the survivors that I work with, whether that be in trainings for us allies or in regular day-to-day conversation. It's also important to lift up those voices of people who are regularly unheard and often silenced. Even though I'm not a survivor, I totally know what the feeling's like. I know what it's like to be talked over, ignored, or never even invited to the table for a conversation. It's also important to remain humble when practicing good allyship and realizing that sometimes you don't know it all. Like when I started at My Life, My Choice, I was very naive, and there's times where I'm like, I don't know anything about this. So that's why it's really important to listen. Working alongside survivors really helped me hone my listening skills to open me up to a whole new perspective and new information that I can pass on to the people in my life in the hopes that they can work alongside the survivors here and join the movement as an ally as well. I've also learned working alongside the survivors here how to call people into conversation instead of calling them out. By calling people into conversation and sharing new perspectives with them, you have the opportunity to shift preconceived misconceptions and invite them how to be an intentional ally instead. That's how our survivors build their movement, and I think that's an excellent model to replicate.
Thank you so much, Niah. And just hearing from the three of you makes me feel like just really privileged to work with such strong allies. None of it's surprising. I've learned so much. And when I think of AJ and Niah, you know, who are much younger than I am, how much they teach me as well. And so many times, like, they're my go-to people. And I don't have to feel like, oh God, they might think you should know that. You've been here for a long time. Anytime I need help from them, they're always very, very supportive, welcoming, and uplifting. The three of you, Amy, AJ, and Niah, really, I know for me, when I ever doubt myself, I've had conversations with the three of you where you're like, no, this is who you are. Like, you've all lifted me up in times where I really, really doubted myself. And with that said, working with the three of you, alongside the three of you, has helped me, you know, in my growth. You know, when I think of myself, I know that I'm, you know, good at public speaking. I know that I'm a good trainer, you know, a great advocate. I do know how to use my voice. I do webinars, but all that back of the house stuff, you know, like even just being here today, like I need the folks on my team who help, you know, and Sonia, I want to give you a shout out as well. And she's probably saying, oh God, why'd you give me a shout out? But Sonia, who, you know, any time I come up with an idea, and not those crazy bright ideas I used to have before recovery, you know, these Niah, Amy, AJ, and Sonia, I just have to say it again, when I come up with like ideas around these webinars, they don't say, oh no, you can't do that. They come together and meet with me and help me to make it happen. Like, I wouldn't be here sitting in, like, this webinar would not be taking place if it were not for strong allies who believe in me. And so it has helped me in my growth to where I had did a series a few months back, and from their support, it's like, okay, I'm doing another fall series because I know I have a team of allies, and where my esteem might have been low in certain areas, they just come and lift me up and help me to carry out whatever mission that I have. And Kaylin, you know, I have to give her a shout out, you know, who's doing the back of the house stuff, you know, who is a fabulous ally. And I'm talking like really young people who came to My Life, My Choice, right, for a position. I mean, they cared about the cause, but just became like these fabulous, supportive people who have helped me grow. You know, I just can't, I don't even have enough words to express how they all have supported me. And it's contributed to my growth in ways that I don't even have enough time to explain. We won't have enough time to talk about all of that. But it's, I couldn't imagine working anywhere else. And with that said, as I mentioned, you know, the younger people, and Niah talked about, you know, coming here, and Niah's been with us a little over a year. So Niah, how has your perception of the term sex work changed while working at My Life, My Choice?
Thank you, Audrey. Like I said before, when I first started working at My Life, My Choice, I'll admit it, I was very naive. I really didn't know anything about exploitation or the commercial sex industry in the slightest. Like, I'd seen Taken, I'd heard about R. Kelly and Jeffrey Epstein, but I've since learned through working here that exploitation is so sensationalized in the media to mask the fact that it's an everyday reality happening right in your own community. When I got to college, sex work was something that was super normalized amongst young women. I went to undergrad at Northeastern University here in Boston, and the interesting thing that I noticed about these conversations around considering sex work and the rise of OnlyFans was that it was really led by my white peers, like white girls from middle class families in the suburbs, going to a prestigious school in Boston. So I found that very peculiar because we know that those are not the people who are overrepresented in the commercial sex industry. And the way that they talked about sex work was very cavalier. Like they talked about it like it was easy. And a lot of young girls think it is easy, especially with the rise of OnlyFans. We have a lot of young girls who are like 15, 16, 17, waiting till their 18th birthday so they can get an OnlyFans or getting fake IDs and stuff like that because it's so normalized at this point. Working at My Life, My Choice has really changed my perception of the commercial sex industry because I now know that's not simple or easy. Girls aren't joining OnlyFans at 18 once they are in college because they want to make extra money. Instead, I've since learned that our youth are being groomed and exploited from a young age. These are the girls that don't have a choice, and especially our girls of color, and also the LGBTQ youth. While working on a project with Audrey, I asked if 40% of US sex trafficking victims are Black, then how did the privileged white voices co-opt this conversation? I'd like to leave you all to think about that.
Thank you so much, Niah, and a great, great point. And you and I have talked about that quite a few times, right? And who's leading the conversation and not hearing from the survivors who are really suffering. AJ, from a public health perspective, why is allyship so important to the movement? And I really want you to touch on that.
Yeah. You know, we always hear like, oh, this is a public health issue, or what is a public health issue? And there's certain things that characterize something as a public health issue. And one of the main things is that it's an issue that affects people across communities. And while traditionally people who don't work in this field, it's the sex industry is like, oh, that happens over there. It doesn't happen to people we love or the people in our communities. But in reality, every day, young people are bought and sold for sex in our communities. And they're deceived and manipulated into this industry, right next door to us. And if you are not in the life, it's very easy to have the privilege to look away from that. But that is, but the reality is harsh, and we all know that for most part who are sitting in this space. But the other thing that makes something a public health issue is that there are certain communities at higher risk than others. It is well documented that exploiters prey on vulnerable children who have experienced childhood abuse, violence or chaos in the home, involvement in the child welfare system, involvement in the juvenile justice system, homelessness, or have a history of missing from care. And so that there's a specific group of people who are particularly at risk, group of young people. To add on to that, the young people most vulnerable to CSEC are living at the crossroads of, often living at the crossroads of racism, sexism, classism, and often heterosexism and trans negativity. And in particular, I'm talking about Black, Latinx, and LGBTQ youth from low income backgrounds who are at this disproportionate risk for CSEC. And as a data person, I'm gonna put some stats in for you. So of the 278 youth we served last year, 64% identified as youth of color, 40% identified as LGBTQIA, and 92% were involved in the child welfare system, juvenile justice system, or the Department of Mental Health, or more than one of those, one or more of those. The average age of entry into life for the youth served by our program is 14 years old. And so we have this characterization of these group of kids who are at risk for being exploited. And the other thing that makes something a public health issue is the health impacts, and it's increasingly well documented that the monumental and often generational impact that being in the life has on these youth, especially in regards to their physical and emotional well-being and safety. Because of all of this, a public health approach to CSEC is really important. A public health approach informs who's at the table in the fight against CSEC. At My Life, My Choice, we know that it's important to work with and train with various providers in our community. I'm talking about law enforcement or members of the legal community, social service providers, healthcare providers, educators. And we know that it's important, like all of these people need to be at the table in order to combat CSEC. But most importantly, who needs to be at the table are survivors. And that is why we are a survivor-led organization, because survivors are the people with the expertise and the knowledge that non-survivors don't have. Without their voice, what are we doing? I don't know. I can't even fathom, creating anti-trafficking programs without their voice. A public health approach is also important because it forms who we need at the table. Or how we intervene. So like I said, and how Amy said, and Niah said, being survivor-led is key. And allyship is important in this because we, as allies, we believe survivors deserve to be heard, believed, and at the table setting the agenda. And lastly, I just want to say that public health approach is important because you have to address the structural inequities that allow CSEC to exist in our communities, and the bad beliefs that people have, such as it's okay to buy or sell another human being. We don't believe that. And as allies, it's our job to work alongside survivors to change that narrative and ensure resources are being properly leveraged in the fight against CSEC.
Thank you so much for that fabulous public health breakdown, which is so true. All right. So back to the full panel. How does working alongside survivors help you with your own growth? And Amy, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. So I know I've mentioned this already, but I do think that this work has really encouraged me to stay aware and keep an openness of my own development through regular reflection and conversation with others, and just sort of being open to constantly learning. On a more personal note, for a long time as a young person, I didn't really feel like I ever had a voice. I wasn't very assertive, very quiet, and pretty reserved. But working at My Life, My Choice for the last 8 years has helped me to find my own voice and assert myself more. And really, this has happened through the survivor role models and leaders who I get to work with every day at My Life, My Choice. And Audrey, I really have to credit you to that because we've known each other for a long time, and you're the one person who is always sort of lifting me up and pushing me to be better and to do better. I know that that's not your job or the job of other survivors to help me grow, but I really truly have learned so much about myself and how I want to show up for the survivors I work with, both my coworkers, but also the young people who I serve.
Thank you so much, Amy. Niah.
Thank you, Audrey. I've personally grown a lot here during my time at My Life, My Choice. Even though the bulk of my time here has been remote, I really do feel like I've built such close relationships and bonds with the survivors here and all the people I worked with. How many organizations have such strong and powerful women of color at the forefront of their organization? My Life, My Choice is modeling something that many workplaces cannot compete with. You don't see this every day. I don't get to work alongside such powerful people every day. And I'm beyond honored and proud to work alongside such incredible people every day. Seeing our survivors use their voices and reclaim their power inspires me to do so as well, like Amy said, and use my own voice and claim my own power. That's something really invaluable to me because I've grown so much professionally, but also personally. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. AJ.
Yeah, my answer is not too different than Amy and Niah, but there's truly something amazing and powerful about working with a group of women who are invested in each other's growth. What I found working with survivors, and I have to shout out Audrey for this, is, she often sees my strengths and sees my value before I even recognize it. And she goes out of her way to let me know. and it's really, I think, helped me grow in all aspects of my life. It's pushed me outside of my comfort zone. A good example is this webinar. I was like, I don't know, Audrey. And she was like, you have to do it. And I'm here, and I appreciate someone who sees me in a light that thinks I'm worthy of showing up to a space like this. And like I said, it's helped me in all aspects of my life, and especially in my personal life too. And so I'm also really grateful to have the support of my survivor colleagues.
Thank you so much, AJ. And I have to just highlight, you know, when it comes to things like the LGBTQ community and getting my language right, how you're like, you know, in racism and privilege, how I've learned so much from you, and how you have been my go-to person to make sure that, you know, I am on point with language and not excluding anyone or making anyone feel unseen. So I just want to acknowledge that as well, how I appreciate how you educate me, which really makes me think about, when we think of allyship and survivorship, this movement, you know, this movement is not just, there's layers, there's different communities that are in this movement. It's not just about women who are children who've been sold. It's like the LGBT community, trans folks. And so it's just great to work in an organization where people have different expertise around language and communities. And I need to just say to you how you've helped in my growth in that area as well, AJ. All right, so Amy, even though you're a brilliant clinician, you've always made me feel like an expert in the field. What would you say to other clinicians working alongside survivor leaders?
Well, first, I think that you and I, Audrey, have a really long-standing relationship and a mutual respect for one another. We met well before my time at My Life, My Choice, and you really taught me about what young survivors need, and have helped me to really think about how to approach the young people I work with. I think that I really, well, for myself and also other clinicians, it's really about approaching this work with a genuineness and from a place of real non-judgment and really just care and kindness. I also think it's about trying to dispel this myth that just because we have certain degrees or a license or the title of clinician or therapist, that doesn't make us an expert. I don't have the lived experience. I see the survivors who I work with as a whole person. They're much more than just their experience and their story. And they've had such an impact on the youth in more ways than just being a survivor. So many times I've seen others rely on survivors just for their story, but survivors really need to be seen as part of the youth team. They really need to be lifted up because they know what this young survivor needs better than I do or other clinicians might. Survivors are able to join with young people and can say things that clinicians might not be able to. And I think about how many, like the many times, Audrey, that you've come in and have been able to say to some of the young women who I work with, who are my clients, things that I, just because of who I am and because of my role, I can't, they wouldn't have been received in the same way, right? I think survivors give our young survivors the hope that they need to see, and that's just so powerful. I mean, you and other survivor mentors under my team have really been the bridge to help some of the youth we work with access therapy and other treatment. I mean, you've shown them that therapy can be helpful. Because of that, they've been able to engage and access other supports. And I think you and other survivors on our team have shown our youth that other people can be safe and trusted and be involved to help them heal and grow.
Thank you, Amy. And I have to, because I'm over here getting all teary-eyed, so I have to respond. You know, I always, you know, aside from Lisa Goldblatt Grace, who you and her were my first two true allies, like where I really, and I'm getting emotional, where I've really felt that my role was valuable. I think of many times the group home that you ran, and I would show up, and if kids were doing certain things before group started, you'd always pull me aside and be like, this is going on and that's going on, and could you mention that, right? And we had such a great way of, when group would start, I would take that information that you gave me without saying to the youth, yeah, Amy said you have a problem with this and that. I would be creative in addressing whatever that issue was. And I loved how you would just like, because Amy is very low key, but in those times I could see you like, yes, Audrey, yes, thank you, because I've been wanting to say that. I've been thinking that, but I know I couldn't say it. And I just, you know, and this is not a thing about, this is just the truth of the matter. Doing this work, being a woman in recovery, being someone who was involved in the life, I didn't begin this work thinking I had it going on. And I still try to practice a level of humility in doing this work. And you taught me that as well. And even during this webinar, and you guys know I'm just such a realist when I think of you and Lisa, and, you know, starting the webinar, and, you know, and I'm talking and I'm like, Lisa would put her name above mine, and she's texting me, no, you know, and she's like, I feel bad. And I just text her back and I said, no, you wanted me to shine. So you're like, no, you, right? Because the truth of the matter is she would put my name above hers. And it wasn't about, so she's feeling, you know, she's feeling all bad. But that was like my ally in this webinar from the background in the chat, right? That I know she wants me to shine. I know she wants me to be in the forefront. So I didn't feel, I was like, oh my God, my girl still has my back. You know what I'm saying? And so that's what, you know, aside from all the allies at My Life, My Choice over the years, you and I say it all the time. I'm not, you know this, Lisa knows this. I'm not just saying this on this webinar. I say it all the time that the two of you were the two women that uplifted me and were the two strongest allies that helped get me to where I am today. So I have to acknowledge that. And so with that said, Amy, you provide clinical supervision to a number of survivor mentors and leaders on staff. How do you balance supervision and allyship at the same time? Because that has to be, you know, that has to be a little tricky. Like the survivors are the experts, but like I supervise them too. How does that, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think really it's about everything that I just said in my previous answer, but also recognizing that I am in a position of power as a clinical supervisor, and just always having to like hold that awareness throughout the supervisory relationship. It's really, I see it as a balance of support and collaboration, as well as encouraging the women I supervise around professional growth and development. It's really, I try really hard not to take over. I don't want, that's not my job. Instead, I really just want to be supportive. And I think that the women who I supervise, they learn from me. I think I also learn from them. We really work together. And honestly, I feel like it's been pretty incredible to see the women I supervise, like sort of believe in their voice. I think they've found their voices, but it's about believing in their voices. And so I see my role as like constantly reinforcing that for them. I think there are a couple of examples that I would love to share if I have time to do. Okay. So oftentimes, you know, many of the mentors attend team meetings for the youth that they are mentoring. And there are a few women who I work with who have asked me to attend with them. And what's been really interesting and so amazing and incredible to witness is just, you know, I'll go as their supervisor for support, but it's really about me taking the back seat. And I've seen our mentors advocate for the young people they serve, speak up, and help teams understand why a young person might be doing what they're doing. And really, you know, after the meeting's over, I say to them, why did I even have to be there? You just did, like, you did an amazing job. And I think it's really like, it's been so amazing to see the confidence increase, and the mentors who I supervise feel really good and strong in the work that they're doing with the young people. I think also, just going back to attending meetings with mentors, there have been situations where collaterals in those meetings might say to me, oh, Amy, can you speak to, you know, whatever's going on to the youth? And it's really important and actually just like critical that I am the one who steps back and says to the mentor, actually, like, what do you think? You're the one who's working with this youth. You're the expert. You're the one who can speak to this. So I think it's about collaboration, encouragement, and just like working together.
Thank you, Amy. You know, and just to kind of piggyback off that, right after you say all that, you know, I have to speak on what it's like being supervised by someone who's not a survivor, but an ally. And so I feel very fortunate that I've been with My Life, My Choice for almost 20 years, almost from the beginning, and being supervised. And again, I've been around like before the movement even gotten to where it is right today. So I remember things like even Lisa, who was my supervisor, like a lot of things, I remember we do things, we're like, were we supposed to charge them for that? You know, the two of us didn't know what we were doing, but one thing that she did real well while supervising me, even when she didn't know, or we didn't know as a team what we should be doing. One of the things that her supervision did for sure, I remember she would say, people would say to her, do you pay her? And Lisa was like, yeah, this is a job. Like, we do pay her, right? And I think back and I think, why would people even ask such a crazy question? But people would ask her that. And also, her supervising me, people would sometimes say to her, oh, could you come speak and then have a survivor come speak and tell their story? And you know, early on, that made sense to me because I was like really nervous. Okay, you know, in the beginning, I remember like thinking I couldn't even do it without her at my side. And she would tell people, and she would say to me, no, you're gonna go do it. And she would call them and be like, they're the expert. Audrey's she'll cover all that you need to, you know, that you need presented. And she's not coming to tell her story. And the other uplifting piece is, you know, back those days when I was really feeling shaky and insecure, and I'd be like, I can't do it. And Lisa would be like, yes, you can. And I remember people would ask me to do things and I would think she was coming, and she's like, no, I'm not coming with you. You can do it. And that helped me so much in my growth. And just to have someone helping me with my professional development and how to help me with that. And I've learned so many things that I apply in my work today, even through you know, myself being there from the beginning at My Life, My Choice. Some of what my supervisor gave me as an ally, those are the things that, a lot of those things are the things that I'm practicing with the survivors who are coming behind me at My Life, My Choice. From good supervision, from Lisa, esteem building. And so I'm proud to say, right? Because I'm that person, like, we laugh because I'm like, I'm the Grinch. I'm not real people-y, right? People get on my nerves real quick. But because of the nurturing through supervision and her lifting me up, I am now able to give that to survivors at My Life, My Choice who come behind me to help them in their professional development, in their growth. So the answer to that question is it was awesome, and it still is awesome to be supervised by an ally that believes in the work that I'm doing and the work that the agency is doing. And with that, AJ, as an ally, instead of using power over others, how do you use power with them?
Thanks, Audrey. When I think about this question, I think it lies with being aware of your privilege as a non-survivor. We all come to this work with a different intersection and layers of vulnerability, but some of us have intersections that give us more privilege. And in this case, being a non-survivor is one of them. As a non-survivor, I don't face the same barriers that survivors have, survivors of trafficking have. Kind of like Amy mentioned, you know, as a non-survivor, if I'm in a space, sometimes what happens is like questions are directed at me when actually it's more appropriate for a survivor leader to answer, because they are the experts. I'm the data person, you know what I mean? I'm like, this is not my avenue. And that, but the inherent nature of someone to like overlook a survivor is what gives a non-survivor their power. And I don't think that I would be an effective ally if I didn't examine the harmful dynamics that causes and do work to combat it. So with that, like, what does power with look like? And power with is a reframe, you know, it's a better approach. It's a collective approach. It's co-creative. And I think it's stronger because there's strength in collective voice and collective power. And I just want to, you know, Amy talked a lot about what I'm about to say. I'm going to pull out themes that I've heard, but she talked about what it's like to do this in practice. But things that I hear are that involve being power with is breaking down hierarchies, you know, learning from each other, leveraging each other's strengths. And sometimes that means giving up power. If you're a person in a place of privilege and have the power, it means often giving up your power and being okay with that. And I relate that a lot of us to someone as like the back of the house, because as in an admin role, there is power in admin roles because there's decision-making power. And so I have awareness of that when I am doing my day-to-day work. I think a big theme that we've highlighted is like being invested in each other's growth, truly like in development. And that is truly something special about working at My Life, My Choice. And I also think about being open to hard conversations, even if it's uncomfortable. And I think even this word power, it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary to talk about. And lastly, it's never assume your work as an ally is done. Like me as a person, I know all the ways in which people are affected physically by being in the life. I don't. It's not my lived experience. And so my work is never done. And that is having power with, in my opinion.
Thank you, AJ. Well said. All right. And then to kind of talk a little bit more, you know, we talked about the CSEC, and we can't talk about CSEC without talking about disproportionality and racial justice. So how has anti-racism work impacted you as an ally? And Amy, Niah, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Audrey. As a Black woman, anti-racism is especially important to me because there really is no justice without racial justice. It really is something that is everywhere, you know, you can't escape it. It's our lived reality. And I'm really grateful to work for an organization where anti-racist work is prioritized amongst our staff because it will ultimately improve how we serve our vulnerable youth. In the stats that AJ shared earlier, we serve a ton of youth of color. So if we weren't doing anti-racist work in our own time, we wouldn't be able to effectively serve our youth. CSEC doesn't discriminate, people do. By that, I mean that all youth under the age of 18 are vulnerable to exploitation regardless of race. However, we all know that youth of color, especially LGBTQ youth of color, are disproportionately affected by CSEC. These youth are sitting at the intersection of many different isms, like AJ said previously, which makes their lived experience that much harder. Still, the way that these exploited youth are treated by the adults in their lives is drastically different based on race. For example, Black girls have been historically hypersexualized and adultified as a way to justify the abuse they face at the hands of adults. We know that white youth are being exploited, face drastically different experiences than their peers of color. An example of this racism is the rates at which these youth are sold for. White girls are worth more than our youth of color. So this is definitely what I mean by CSEC doesn't discriminate, people do. It affects all of our youth, but it's the adults who are really perpetuating the racism that these kids face.
Well said, Niah. Well said. My goodness, I love her. Now, you see, she's been with us 1 year. I'm like, I love it. I love it. And that's just the teamwork and helping each other learn. Amy.
Sorry, my mute button. So I actually am going to talk for a minute about the organizational anti-racism work that we're doing at My Life, My Choice. As everyone here knows, we're an agency that's really rooted in survivor leadership and social justice, and we have a commitment and obligation to engage in ongoing learning, to examine ourselves, and to be active in fighting for racial justice and equity. Over the last year and a half, we've worked closely with consultants to support our growth and our ongoing learning. And more specifically, some of the anti-racism work that My Life, My Choice is doing includes all of our staff engaging in DEI work through active participation in different affinity spaces that we have. We've done deep dives of all systems, policies, procedures, communication, and our culture to determine where we're falling short in making changes in these areas. And we know that the work has to be both internal and external. So we're not only impacting our staff and our own growth, but also the youth we serve and the systems that we are a part of. We do all of these things because that's what it means to lead by our core values. And we know that this needs to be done to fight commercial sexual exploitation of children.
Thank you so much. AJ.
Yeah, and I'm just building off what Niah and Amy said. I think that, you know, to do that work as an organization, that means that the white people in an organization need to address their white privilege. And so as an individual, I work hard to be an effective ally to survivors, but to my colleagues that are people of color. And to do so, it means like taking an honest look at my personal beliefs, stereotypes I might have, and levels of privilege that I carry in regards to racism, in regards to race, human trafficking, and survivor leadership. And I piggyback a lot of the techniques that I talked about before and being an effective ally to survivors, but it's about listening. It's about taking a step back and recognizing that as a white person, you carry power historically and currently that you have to always be breaking down and examining to be an effective ally and to do this work. And I truly believe that you can't do anti-trafficking work if you don't look at your privilege as a white person. So yeah.
Thank you so much. All right. Niah, you went, right? Okay. So we only have a couple minutes left. I'm just overwhelmed. So just to kind of, I hope people have walked away with some key things that you needed to know about effective allyship. I encourage you, challenge yourself, check in with the survivors at your organization, those hard conversations. Do you feel that I am a strong ally? Can you share with me in areas that you feel that I'm a strong ally? Can you share in areas where you think I could do some work on my allyship? Don't be afraid to have those conversations, and survivors will appreciate you, for having those conversations. And then for those of us who are survivors, I sometimes our role in organizations, everyone might not be an ally. There might be one or two people you're like, hey, so I would encourage those of us who have been uplifted by allies, if we see that another survivor is not being uplifted by an ally, step in and be an ally for that survivor coming, so survivors can be allies for the survivors coming behind them. So one of the things that I began with and I want to end with, because I feel strongly about this, and that is survivors didn't create the problem, so they shouldn't have to be the ones to solve it. That's why allies are so important to the work. At My Life, My Choice, we focus on power sharing, not power hoarding. And that's on both ends, the survivor and the ally. So it's about sharing that power. We have 1 minute. I want to thank everyone who showed up today. I thought we might have had time for questions, but it looks like we have 1 minute. Sonia, I don't know if you have one quick question, or, folks want to hang around. If you picked one question, Kaylin, can you put everybody on the screen? And if there's one question that you think should be answered before we close out, Sonia, and if not, and I know folks had some questions.
Yes, this is Sonia. Can you hear me? Where is it? I texted you a question, Audrey.
Okay. All right. I saw that text, it's.
Yes, from Bert, from Breed.
Okay. I'm at LMHC. Is it appropriate? Is it appropriate advertise or note that I have worked with individuals in the commercial sex industry in my practice? I'm looking to be a better ally. I'll turn that over real quick to either AJ or Amy.
I think that if you have experience in providing services to exploited youth and you've had training, then I absolutely think that it is appropriate in your marketing to say that this is an area that you specialize in. Yes. AJ, I don't know if you want to, oh, sorry.
Oh, no. Were you done? I'm sorry.
I'm done. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody who came out to support us. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day. I want to thank Amy, AJ, and Niah, allies that I truly love and respect in the highest regard, and excited to just work with a great team of folks. Have a good day. Bye. We can stay on. Did we stop recording, Kaylin?